What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Prop Show here at FTN. Chris Meaney and Alex Blickle here with you. And it is not too early, never too early to dive into week one of the NFL season. We're just a handful of days away from preseason football and about 40 days away from week one. We've known for quite some time the week one matchups, the lines and the totals and what matchups we have circled on our calendars. But once you see player props available, it does feel like it is here. And over at UnderdogFantasy.com, they do have week one player props available. We're already seeing some live movement, so we wanted to jump in early and share some of the edges that we have with you guys as we creep closer, as I mentioned, to week one. It's Alex Blickle 1, Chris Meaney here with you. So as you see, if you're hanging out with us, of course, 50% deposit match bonus up to $250 using promo code FTN over at Underdog Fantasy. But as I mentioned, Alex, like, to me, once I start seeing these player props, it's like, it's here now. Like, it's only a couple of weeks away from week one.
100%. And look, not everyone's going to want to tie up money for the next almost 2 months at this point, but you never know when someone's watching this. And honestly, think of it like best ball for just week one, right? We've been doing best ball drafts for months at this point. Man, it's just as fun to build these pick 'em plays. So I'm really excited. And then the other aspect of that is I think we've got some real edges on lines right now that are going to move quite a bit before we actually get to week one. So we can take advantage of that right now.
Yeah, I know we were already chatting before about some live movement already, and it's just been a couple days since he's been available. So yeah, we're going to roll through game by game, and we'll be with you throughout the entire season, of course, giving our favorite picks and some edges. But we want you guys we want to show off what we can do here and find some of the edges over at Underdog Fantasy. So sign up over there. But Alex, let's walk through, and let's start with week one and the first game that's going to get us underway. The two-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. No team has ever won the Super Bowl 3 years in a row. This was a matchup of the AFC Championship game last year. It's Baltimore and Kansas City. What are you seeing here that you like? Anything?
Yeah, there's only one that I absolutely love here. Travis Kelce, lower 72.5 receiving yards. Baltimore was 27th in opponent plays per game last year, so they faced a lot of play volume. Well, they've got Derrick Henry now. So I think the very first thing that we're going to see, the change that we're going to see, the effect of King Henry is that Baltimore controls the ball a lot more. So this was already a defense that was 8th in DVOA allowed to tight ends. It's already a defense that was really difficult as a whole for opposing fantasy offenses. And now they're going to be even more difficult because they're not going to allow that many plays. Kelce was under this number in 5 of 15 regular season games last year. I have a very, very difficult time seeing him get to this number against Baltimore to start the year.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what Travis Kelce can do this year with the additions that Kansas City made, and with Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, the fastest man alive ever at the combine, just trying to stretch the field a little bit, because last year it was, I don't want to say easy to defend Travis Kelce, but it was easier to defend him, bracket him, double him, without that field stretcher on the squad. So I do like the call. Of course, a lot of the attention will be on Travis Kelce. Rashee Rice most likely not going to be there week one. Derrick Henry's number at 71.5 does seem fair. I mean, this is a good Kansas City defense. I'll probably be leaning on him to score a touchdown every single week, considering what we saw from Gus Edwards in this offense last year. He's among the leaders in goal line rushing attempts. 12 of his 13 rushing touchdowns came inside the 5-yard line. Lamar's not like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts calling his own numbers. So I think that Derrick Henry is not a hot take, but I think Derrick Henry is going to flirt with a touchdown per game. And I'm seeing there over 0.5 rushing or receiving touchdowns. And I know he's not going to do a lot of work through the air, but this is a guy that I think is going to have a monster season. As you mentioned, this Ravens team, what they want to do is run the football. And Alex, they just didn't do that last year in the playoffs against Kansas City. They got away from their game plan. They're just not going to get away from the run game with Derrick Henry on their squad.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's a doubly good call, because that would correlate pretty well with the Kelce under as well. So I think if we add this, it's not like we're getting any kind of correlation penalty. The 3X is the standard. So if Henry and the Ravens are really controlling the ball offensively, just moving the ball on the ground, and he scores, or you could do the higher than 71.5 rushing yards. Either way, I think you're getting some strong correlation with the lower 72.5 receiving yards for Kelce. So I like that start quite a bit.
Game 2 on the schedule is in Brazil. That's right. A little Friday night
Mhm.
football between the Philadelphia Eagles and Jordan Love, who had just a monster first year in the NFL, his first full year as a starter, and a wicked second half for him. And you see Saquon Barkley there at 74.5 rushing yards, Josh Jacobs at 61.5 rushing yards, two running backs on new teams. Anything you love here? Any edges you see?
There's nothing I'm playing in this game as of yet. The one that I have a lean on is Jordan Love higher than 245 and a half passing yards. I do think this Philly defense is going to be a lot better through the air. I mean, you're an Eagles fan too. Can you remember a time where they didn't just have this much talent in the secondary, but this much depth?
No, not at all. I thought they had an amazing draft. I mean, I get the two of the top three corners in the draft is a huge win. It's exactly what the team needed too.
And they bring in CJ Gardner-Johnson, but I do think they are still going to be a pass funnel because they are quite good against the run. The linebackers improved. Vic Fangio now in town running the show. But most of all, it's just, look, Philly's offense should be really, really good, really explosive again. So I think Green Bay will have to throw the ball. I lean, therefore, to the higher than 245 and a half. Not a strong lean, though, so not something I'm playing as at this moment.
Yeah, no Packers wide receivers yet. I mean, it's going to be really tough to figure out that wide receiver room. There's 4 or 5 different guys and 2 tight ends and one of the youngest rooms in all of football. But Jordan Love from week 11 to week 18, 7-2, 21 touchdowns, 1 pick. He had a 79 QBR, which was the highest. And in that run, he played Detroit and Kansas City, and he tossed for over 535 yards, and he had 6 touchdowns. And he's the highest QBR against Kansas City's defense the entire season. Jordan Love does feel like he is the real deal, and he's got a lot of weapons there to work with as well. So I'm not really seeing anything I like. And, you know, maybe if I see like a Christian Watson at a low number, it only takes like 1 or 2 catches for him to get there. Maybe something I could jump on. But we'll move on from this game, and we'll head to the Sunday football. We have Jacksonville and Miami. Not a lot of changes between these two teams. We did see some, movement in Gabe Davis with Jacksonville and Brian Thomas Jr., but not available just yet. Anything you see here? Tyreek Hill at 77.5. This was a number I think we were blindly smashing last year.
Yeah, I mean, these are the first discounts we see on the slate. So apparently they chose this game to start the discounts. So if you haven't signed up yet for Underdog, this is a perfect reason to do so. You get yourself 250 up to 250 free dollars to use, and you get to take advantage of these discounts. So do so there. Tyreek Hill's actual line 94.5. You can see all of the full lines here on screen. The one that stands out to me the most, I think, is probably Jalen Waddle at 64.5. But I don't feel like super confident about that one. Maybe, in fact, because there's a little bit more uncertainty in terms of where Tua is going to throw the ball this year. Bring in OBJ, bring in Jonnu Smith. Maybe the move is to just go to Tua higher than 261.5. But again, this is not a game that I feel super strong about anything.
No, among the leaders in passing yards last year, and the fact that this game will be in Miami and it's not going to be cold, it's a plus for Tua. There's no question about that. Jalen Waddle, I think, is, from a real life fantasy redraft standpoint, we're talking pick him here. He's a guy that I think is going to bounce back, and his numbers may be fairly low to start the season the way that he finished last season. But let's continue here. We have Arizona and Buffalo. And nothing yet from Marvin Harrison Jr., but we do have Kyler Murray and Josh Allen on the board, James Conner, and really James Cook as well. His numbers at 71.5. This is an offense that completely changed when Joe Brady took over. It became a run-first offense. Stephon Diggs phase of the offense, short, intermediate type of throws from Josh Allen, and really leaning on the run game here. And then James Conner at 54.5. That one does seem low to me. It's not one of my favorites, but he's coming off his first 1,000-yard season in his NFL career. Over 5, I think it was just on the button at 5 yards per carry. And even from a best ball standpoint, I've seen Trey Benson go ahead of him. So James Conner getting a bit of disrespect here over at Underdog Fantasy. Are you interested at all in that number?
I was just going to say I would love it, except I just don't know what to think about Benson. And I don't know. Do you have a strong feel that Connor's going to start the year at least start the year as the clear lead guy?
I do, yeah. And I think, in his final year of the contract, I think Benson is the future back in the desert. But James Conner in the final year, I think they're really going to lean on him. He's never had a full season on his NFL resume. Yeah. So, you assume week 1, he's healthy, ready to go. We can hammer Connor props early as Benson's the rookie learning the playbook. But I'm sure at times, especially if Connor is, dinged up or not 100%, it may turn into closer to a 60-40, 70-30 type of share in the backfield. But this is a number that I probably will jump on right away week 1, assuming that I would assume that he's getting like 17, 18 plus opportunities right off the get-go.
I kind of hope that they add 0.5 rushing plus receiving touchdowns for Connor.
Oh,
I would be all over that because regardless of what I think about like the overall split between the two, I am very confident that it will be Connor getting the goal line carries to start the year. So with you overall there, I would say on Connor, the one that I love from this game, Dalton Kincaid higher, 47.5 receiving yards. He was over this in 3 of their last 4 games. We really saw them start to treat Kincaid as one of the primary options. Of course, it helps that there's no Stephon Diggs in town now in Buffalo, but also this is just a phenomenal matchup. Arizona was 31st in DVOA versus tight ends a year ago. And if you hear that and think, okay, but Kincaid isn't really a tight end, he mostly plays slot receiver for them. Well, guess what? They were 30th against other wide receivers, which includes slot guys as well last year. So whatever you think of the role that Kincaid is playing, it's a fantastic matchup.
He's in for a monster season. Like, let's be honest. I mean, roughly 2,000 yards gone from the offense and Diggs and Gabe Davis. And that's like nearly 80% of their end zone targets from last year gone as well. I know Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns and he is going to call his own number inside the red zone. But Dalton Kincaid, I think, is in for a massive season. And I think that's a really low number. And I bet you when we're talking in a few weeks, that's up in the 50s. I think that's a number that's going to climb here as we get closer to week 1. Like that call.
Yeah, I agree completely. Last thing I'll say in this game, do you think that we have some positive correlation between a higher on Connor's rushing yards and a higher on Kincaid's receiving yards, where we say, hey, Arizona is able to run the ball well enough that Buffalo is forced to throw it throughout the game and they can't just lean on James Cook?
Yeah, I can see something like that. Absolutely. Right. Again, that number is really low for Connor, especially the way that he finished his season. So if they can lean on the ground game, of course, that's going to be the game plan, right? I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is just a rookie. Kyler run the ball with James Conner and try to slow the pace down. And then I just think that we're going to see a different offense in Buffalo, not just running a ton, but as I mentioned, the short and intermediate, not taking some shots deep down the field. Not that Allen plays hero ball all the time, but I think the way that they changed their offense in the second half of the season, I think does benefit a guy like Dalton Kincaid and maybe Curtis Samuel at times throughout the season. But the correlation, I think, would work there pretty well. I like where your head's at there. Cool. All right, let's move on.
One thing I want to say real quick. We're not coming into this show with the goal of building a specific play. We just want to run through all the picks, see what we like, what we don't like, which ones we expect to move, that sort of thing. But hey, if we back ourselves into, a perfect 6-pick play or perfect 8-pick play, something like that, maybe we will run it. So I'm going to leave this on the right-hand side as we go, but know that we're not purposely just trying to build a play here. We're just running through all the picks.
And I know you have 6 of your favorites, so we can recap at the end and lock down those 6 favorites. I think I'm throwing Derrick Henry at you and James Conner, but those are certainly two props that do stand out to me. Let's get into a divisional matchup here between the Colts and the Texans. All the love surrounded around CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson here is rushing prop at 45.5. We have Jonathan Taylor at 75.5 rushing yards and Joe Mixon, a new face in Houston, at 58.5, and Stephon Diggs as well at 63.5. It's going to be tough, man, to figure out these Texans wide receivers any given week. You got Tank Dell there at 54.5 and Nico Collins at 61.5.
Well, you said it. It's going to be really tough to figure out the receivers, so I'm not going to try. I'm just going to say, who benefits from all these receivers? CJ Stroud, higher, 271.5 passing yards. He was over this number in 8 of 14 games last season before we saw the injuries to both Tank Dell and Nico Collins. So it's already a good number. Now you add Stephon Diggs. You give him an additional year where we know he's got all the confidence in the world and the coaching staff has all the confidence in the world in him. We even saw them go more pass heavy in the playoffs finally after they were significantly more run heavy than we would have liked throughout much of the regular season. And this Indianapolis team, outstanding matchup. They were 31st in opponent plays per game. So you're getting a guy who already should go over this number, and you're adding play volume, and you're adding a talent like Stephon Diggs. I think this is probably a full 15 to 20 yards too low on Stroud.
Yeah, and we have started our projections, to lead the NFL in passing attempts and passing yards. And you mentioned the opponent plays. I mean, using our pace tools, the Colts played at a quicker pace than anybody, and that's what Shane Steichen likes to do. And I'm sure that's going to carry over here in year 2 with Anthony Richardson and the Colts. I like that call there. And yeah, why play the game? It's like the Packers, right? With Christian Watson and all these other guys, just take the quarterback. Okay, so we'll keep going here. New England and Cincinnati. I think this is one of the largest spreads in week 1. The Bengals at home against the Patriots. In fact, the Patriots aren't favored in any of their games this season, but the defense is still pretty solid. Ramondre Stevenson is the only Pat on the board. Is there anything here? Maybe Zach Moss? Zach Moss and we don't really even know what to expect in Cincinnati's backfield. Who knows if he's even going to be the lead there? It could be Chase Brown getting a few touches.
Yeah, you mentioned at the top of the show, we have already seen line movement on a couple of these guys. Zach Moss is the biggest one. We got him lower than 72.5 rushing yards about 3 or 4 days ago. I still love this number at 68.5. And part of it is what you just mentioned. We don't know what kind of split there's going to be between Moss and Chase Brown. Personally, I think we're going to see more Chase Brown than this line suggests. New England, a very solid defense. But here's the kicker. I really, really would be shocked to see Zach Moss have a better role than the one that Joe Mixon had. Mixon went over this number in 5 of 17 games. That's it. I have no idea why this number is this high. Personally, I would probably play this all the way down to 60.
That's wild, the Mixon stat. I know he hasn't been super efficient. I mean, he's got 1,000-yard seasons on his resume, but he's never really been an efficient running back. Plus, the offensive line is not fantastic, and Zach Moss has not been an efficient running back over the course of his career as well. And like you said, you've already seen a little bit of line movement, so it pays to follow Blickle, and we have the conversations happening all the time in the Discord channel there. Higgins seems like a low number 2, but it's New England, it's the defense. It just could be a sloppy game. I could see that being a bit of a low-scoring affair. Anything else to add before you want to move on?
Yeah, I will echo the fact that the Higgins line does seem low. And one of the reasons why I think it's really low is year after year, we saw this Bill Belichick defense just really take away number 1 wide receivers. They were second in DVOA against number 1 wide receivers, and then as high as 21st against wide receiver 2s. How much of that philosophy will carry over with Belichick gone? I don't know, but I would assume it might carry on to at least some degree, in which case, if they're taking away Jamar Chase, Higgins is going to have plenty of opportunities to win. So I would put this in the category of a strong lean, not necessarily a play just yet for me. Do you think there's any correlation between the lower on Zach Moss and the higher on T. Higgins? Like maybe New England surprises and jumps out to a lead and Cincinnati just has to abandon the run?
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case. I just feel like even without thinking that way, it's just like, think about how pass happy this Bengals offense is. Like, regardless of a neutral game script, I mean, they're among the leaders in pass percentage and, our statistics in a neutral or just an overall, standpoint of just having the football offensively. So I just don't really feel like they'll get a lot out of Moss or Brown. But if New England can get up and they can score early, then we could see potentially some more pass attempts there from Joe Burrow. I'll be interested to see if they add a line from Ramondre Stevenson, with Antonio Gibson on the squad now. Will they give a low number for Stevenson? Because he has been one of the better pass catching running backs in the NFL over the past couple of seasons. And if Cincinnati does get up and they score some points, like that's the correlation that I kind of see there with Ramondre. Gerard Mayo, the new head coach there for New England, said coming out of spring, I think it's clear that Jacoby Brissett is the most pro-ready guy they have. And I don't know if that's what you want to hear, even if you're a Pats fan, because Jacoby Brissett's ceiling is not too high. So I don't even know how much they can score to push the pace. But I just feel like that's the way the Bengals are going to play. Even without Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor is just going to continue to play that way. They're going to have the games on Joe Burrow's arms there, on his arm. Pittsburgh and Atlanta. Some new faces here, right? 2 new quarterbacks. Russell Wilson now with the Steelers, 207 passing yards. Kirk Cousins, 249 coming off the ruptured Achilles. We have Najee Harris and Bijan Robinson there, Drake London and George Pickens. Those do seem like pretty low numbers for Pickens and for Drake London, but the Steelers are probably going to be a run-heavy team. So anything here that jumps out at you, Blickle?
Yeah, let's talk about Drake London a little bit, because I have a feeling that he's going to be projected well above this number, and therefore he's going to seem like a great play. I think another guy that would apply to, Arizona, Trey McBride will probably be projected well above his 54.5 receiving yards number. But both of these guys are so boom bust that, last year, for example, Trey McBride was under that 54.5 number in 6 of his last 13 games, even while averaging something like 70 to 75 yards per game. So I think London is in that same category for me, where he's going to project above this number, but he's projecting above because he has those 100-yard games within his range of outcomes. I don't necessarily think that he should be more likely than not to go over the 62.5 number. So I think everyone in this game is kind of a no play for me. Very much concerned that it's just going to be both these teams just want to run the ball and bleed clock for 4 quarters, and it's just going to be not a very fun watch.
Yeah, and the Steelers defense is legit. I mean, it's awesome, right? Getting Patrick Queen too from their division rivals in Baltimore. I think that there's a lot of real nice playmakers there, and who knows, right? Kirk Cousins' first game off that Achilles, you could see some rust. What I'm seeing in the best ball community when I'm drafting over at Underdog Fantasy is that Drake London is going pretty high as wide receiver 10. There's like a cost to pay, and it does feel like you were drafting him at his ceiling. I'm interested to see what the number would be for Kyle Pitts. I'm kind of more interested in him as opposed to Drake London. But George Pickens, it's right. He could have 2 catches in this game for hardly nothing, or he could have 2 catches for like 100 yards. It's the way that he is. He led the NFL in yards per catch at 18.1. And he gets this like big playability, but sometimes he's just very quiet. And a new role for him is the alpha wide receiver 1 with Deontay Johnson off the squad. That's going to be a low scoring game. I'm with you on that one. Minnesota and New York, the Giants at home here. Oh, yeah.
Before we go on, I think one thing that'll be interesting to look at from this game is as we get closer to the start of the season, I expect Underdog will kind of take Prize Picks lead. Prize Picks has those demons and goblins, and Underdog has, I believe they call it Scorchers, where we might see Pickens at like 2x to go over 64.5 yards or something like that. That's where I would want to hit that exact same thing for London. If he's 2x to go over 72.5, something like that, that's where I can start to lean into the fact that they have a wider range of outcomes than most players and just say, as you said, it could be just one play, right? Whether they go over 54.5 or not could be about whether he catches that 40-yard pass. And if he does, then he's not just clearing 54.5, he's also clearing 64.5, 69.5, etc. So that's the way that I would want to play this game, and particularly these 2 guys, London and Pickens, and throw Trey McBride in that same category.
That's a really good call, Blickle. Like, is that what you're doing for most of these boomer bust guys? I mean, you can throw like Rashid Shaheed and Jamison Williams potentially as guys that could give you a 0, but if that X factor is only like 15 more yards, 20 more yards than the original line, I think it's worth it to take the upside on some of these high ceiling wideouts and tight ends.
Yeah, it's something we were doing a lot of at the end of last season, especially on Prize Picks. I'm actually going to be writing a Prize Picks Week 1 article today. It's going to be a free article, so keep your eyes out for that one. And one of the things that they allowed us to do last year was to pair demons between a quarterback and their receiver. So it'd be like Russell Wilson higher than 237.5 passing yards with George Pickens higher than 69.5 receiving yards, something like that. The payout goes way up. And honestly, if both of those things are happening, if Wilson and Pickens are both going over this 207.5 and 54.5 number, it could be because Pickens catches a really long one, and then you're getting just this massive payout for something that, it wasn't significantly less likely to happen than just their base projections.
Right. Yeah. If Russ is going over that number, Pickens is going over that number, because I'm sure everybody watching has seen the Steelers wide receiver room, and it's not fantastic. The wide receiver room in Minnesota is pretty good, but we're unsure who the quarterback is going to be as we move over to the Vikings and the Giants. It does sound like Sam Darnold is getting first team reps in training camp. I'm sure we'll see JJ McCarthy at some point. Justin Jefferson at 81.5. Aaron Jones is now a member of the Vikings at 62.5. Devin Singletary now a member of the Giants at 52.5. And then we have Daniel Jones in there at 214. Malik Neighbors in his first NFL game will have a receiving yard prop at 51.5. He just seemed like a guy that it's tough to figure out because this Giants offense is going to be so brutal. But they can move him around the field. He's the type of player that could certainly help out a quarterback, whether it's like a short yardage bubble screen in the slot. There's just so many different ways that they can use Malik Neighbors. But for me, I may need to see it week 1, Blickle. I don't know. It does seem like a low line, though.
Yeah, I have a confession to make. The Giant stack has been one of my most owned in best ball this season, but
Okay.
I don't think I'm going here for week one. But yeah, man, best ball, give me Daniel Jones, give me Malik Neighbors, give me Darius Slayton in like the second last round, and then my sleeper of the year, the guy that's going to be like, if I get to the finals and the guy that's going to be on 1% of teams, Theo Johnson, tight end for the Giants. He's got speed metrics that remind me of Vernon Davis, and I think his ADP is like, or his ranking over on DraftKings is like 350th. So nobody is taking the guy. I'll take him and just hope that he beats Daniel Bellinger, who I have no faith in whatsoever, to be the leading tight end in the passing game for them.
Yeah, I'm with you on Cody Bellinger, and I think he's already dealing with an injury. And of course, we know Darren Waller is at home working on his next rap video. Okay, so I like the Giants call. I mean, especially for Daniel Jones. I mean, the guy had 700 rushing yards a couple of years ago, and he didn't even have a passing touchdown per game, but he still finishes like as a top 10, top 12 quarterback because of the rushing floor then. Okay, so ready to move on? There's nothing else really that catches your eye here. Let's go to Chicago. Caleb Williams' first start in the NFL, 238.5. We have Calvin Ridley now in the squad for the Titans and DJ Moore there at 62.5. So nothing from Keenan, nothing from Roma Dunze, Hopkins. Still pretty early here, but I have a confession to make as well. Like, I am very intrigued with the Titans this season. I have a lot of shares of them in best ball. I'm a big believer in Brian Callahan as a play caller. He's been around some really big time quarterbacks and Manning and Stafford. He did some good things with Derek Carr in a breakout campaign years ago. And, I thought he changed the offense considerably when Joe Burrow went down last year. And they got a lot from Jake Browning. Like, Jake Browning was accurate. They had a lot of RPOs and got the ball out quick and played to his strengths. And Will Levis has some things to clean up in his game, but bringing in Tyler Boyd, who's familiar with Callahan as a third down specialist in Cincinnati, having Calvin Ridley led the NFL in end zone targets last year. DeAndre Hopkins, not elite, but still has a lot to offer and could be a safety blanket there for a young quarterback. And then two running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield, right? And Spears and Tony Pollard. I'm a little hesitant on the 214. I actually have some respect for the Bears defense. It was pretty decent in the second half, but the Titans are a team that I'll have my eye on here, especially Will Levis's passing yards.
Yeah, I like everything you said there. I do have a lean in this game though, and it's going against the grain. It's going against the ADPs on both DraftKings and Underdog. It's going against a lot of people that I really, really respect in this industry. I like the lower on Calvin Ridley, in large part because I'm not buying the fact that Ridley is the wide receiver one. I think it will be Hopkins. Ridley's going ahead of Hopkins in best ball all over the place. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts here. The other thing I'd add, Chicago was third against wide receiver ones, DVOA allowed, 10th against wide receiver twos last year. So maybe in this matchup, it doesn't even matter who's the wide receiver one and who's the wide receiver two. It could just be tough sledding for both. But I want to go the lower on Ridley because I want to bet on Hopkins being the wide receiver one in this offense.
And I'm totally with you. I'm actually surprised. I joined Mayo this week when we talked wide receivers, and we both said like Hopkins is the guy. Forget about ADP for a second. Like, who's the guy? Hopkins. And Hopkins is going later than him. Roughly wide receiver 40 in drafts. I do have a lot of shares of Hopkins, and Calvin Ridley had an okay season. Like, he was fine. He dealt with some drops, but I think a lot of people are just assuming that he can get back to the last year that he had in Atlanta and the year before he got suspended. It was a phenomenal season, but don't think it's going to be the case. And I think there's a lot of disrespect for Hopkins. I was thinking we would see Hopkins' number, and you got to think that when we do, it's probably going to be lower than this. It's not a fantastic matchup, but it may be like 48, 46.
And talking about hunting for correlation, like that would be a fantastic way to do it. If we see Hopkins, even if he's at like 53.5, go higher on Hopkins, lower on Ridley. It's the same bet. You're betting that Hopkins is the wide receiver one, Ridley is the wide receiver two. If you're right about that, you're probably getting them both correct.
All right, let's go to another divisional matchup in the South. It's Carolina and New Orleans. Bryce Young at 199.5. I don't even know off the top of my head how many times he had 200 passing yards in a game. I'd say like 3, potentially. This wasn't a guy that pushed the ball down the field. I think he was like maybe 9 for 20 in terms of passes, like 20 plus air yards down the field. And it wasn't like he completed a whole lot of them. He does have an upgraded wide receiver room. There's only one here on the board, Deontay Johnson. Derek Carr at 266, Alvin Kamara at 58.5, Chris Olave at 68.5. It's kind of interesting. Olave, he should be a target hog there for the Saints.
Yeah, I've got another hot take in this game, which is I think Deontay Johnson's quarterback situation has upgraded from last year. Maybe not that much of a hot take. It's not like anyone's really clamoring that the Steelers quarterback room was any good, but I don't think Bryce Young will be anywhere near as bad as he was a year ago. As you mentioned, the wide receiver room is just so much better for him. I think that will help, and we'll also just see some development from year 1 to year 2. So I'm tempted to go higher on Deontay, 52.5 receiving yards, but I think the matchup and just the fact that, hey, it's week 1, right? Like I could be right about Deontay and Bryce Young throughout the season and have that not show up in week 1. So it's a lean, but not a play for me. And then pretty much nothing's a play on the New Orleans side. I could certainly get behind Olave, 68.5 receiving yards, but I think he's going to be grouped with Pickens and who was the other guy in that game that we were talking? Drake London, where I'd rather see if he comes out with a scorcher at 78.5 yards or 83.5, something like that, where I can get a bigger payout. And if he has that big game that we know he's capable of, I'm getting a better payout on
it. Yeah, it's a good call. And you know what? Carolina's defense is actually decent in the second half. Especially inside the division. I think there was a game where they stifled Derek Carr and company, and also Baker Mayfield down the stretch too. Okay, so yeah, we'll move on. That's a game that probably could be pretty ugly as well. Low scoring. Denver and Seattle. Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Javonte Williams. According to reports that the Denver Post is on the roster bubble. Him or Samaje Perine could be cut from the squad, which is phenomenal to think about. Cortland Sutton at 51.5. Low number there for Cortland Sutton, but we just don't know. Is it going to be Bo Nix, his first start in Seattle? I know the defense isn't phenomenal. The secondary is not as great as what we're used to seeing in Seattle, but it's never an easy place to go play, especially if it's going to be the first start for Mr. Bo Nix. Is there anything that catches your eye here? For me, like bringing in Ryan Grubb, from Washington, he did some good things in college football the past couple of years. He talked about how they want to be more pass happy. I was looking at our pace percentage. Like they were number 3, I think, in a neutral setting and number 5 overall in pass percentage. I don't know how much more they could pass the ball, but Geno at 238.5 doesn't really seem like a number that I want to jump on, but I'll be interested to see how this offense looks in the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, there are actually two of them that catch my eye here. I like the lower on Javonte, but as you said, like there's a chance that he gets cut, as shocking as that is, in which case it's not like you're going to win that bet if he gets cut. It just becomes null and void. So not necessarily something I want to play yet. DK Metcalf higher than 61.5 receiving yards is something that I want to play. And shout out to our guy Sam Chowdhury on this one. I'm not sure there's anyone in the industry who has been better from a prop perspective than Sam over the last few years. He absolutely destroyed NBA this season, and I can't wait to see what he does in NFL this year. He pointed out the Metcalf play to me. Metcalf went over this number 9 of 16 games last year, and Denver was 24th in DVOA against wide receiver 1. So I think this is a very nice spot to start the year betting on DK Metcalf. I feel like this line kind of implies this concern that JSN is going to cut more into his workload this year. I don't see it. I see JSN competing much more with Tyler Lockett for those targets, where DK Metcalf has his own role that only he can fill those shoes in. So I really like this number for Metcalf.
Yeah, 100% agree on the JSN and Lockett comment there. Let's go to another divisional matchup, the Chargers and the Raiders. Justin Herbert at 239.5. Of course, a lot has been made of Harbaugh and Roman back together, and this is going to be a run-first offense. Not even seeing anything else from the Chargers. Got Herbert, no backs there yet, no wide receivers. Be interested to see what the number is for Ladd McConkey. I'll probably be more interested in the catches than receiving yards for Ladd McConkey. We have Devontae Adams here at 68.5, Brock Bowers at 42.5. And Zamir White at 59.5. Is there anything here for you? And again, like other situations we've talked about, we just don't know who the starter is week 1 for the Raiders. To be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. I have a lean that it will be Minshew, that he'll be the more impressive quarterback. He gives him a better chance to win. And maybe Antonio Pierce is thinking like, hey, let's start strong here. Let's see if we can win with the veteran Gardner Minshew. And if the wins don't pile up, then we make that switch and we see what we have in Aiden O'Connell again. But anything for you?
There's not. There's one that I was a little bit unsure of, feeling like maybe I should be more confident in the situation. And I know it's a guy that you like, so why don't you talk about Zamir White?
It is, yeah. Zamir White at 59.5. I do believe the backfield's his. I think our projections are slightly low in terms of attempts and rushing yards, but this is a guy that I think will finish inside the top 10 in overall attempts and opportunities. I know it was a very small sample size last year in roughly just the 4 games that he played when Josh Jacobs was out, and he averaged 21 attempts, 99 rushing yards, 2.5 catches per game. And I know he's kind of getting disrespected, I think, in in social media, and Underdog Fantasy is not a decent pick because of maybe the limited upside in terms of catches. We have him for roughly 30. I think that's a number that he could get to, but the Raiders have talked up his game. They've talked up his pass catching ability. I don't believe in Alexander Madison. Dylan Olave is just a 6th-round rookie that they have. So I just think based on pure opportunity alone and volume, that he will get to this 59.5. I don't think he's going to be a super efficient running back. But I think he is a back that, again, at the end of the day, I think we're going to be looking at him as like top 10 in touches. And I know we were talking with Jake Seeley over on the XM show, and he had him 4th overall in rushing attempts. And I thought that was a little high, but I do think that he's cracking that top 10 number, and he's going to be a workhorse back.
I will add, the Chargers were 24th in adjusted line yards allowed last year, so it is a pretty solid matchup. So I think I might be sold on this one with you. And the other thing I'd say here is all of these stats that we're throwing out here, the adjusted line yards, the DVOA versus wide receiver, and a hell of a lot more, you can get at FTN Fantasy now, all in one place. That's in right. Our brand new stats hub. It's magical. I can't wait to use it all season.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Dallas and Cleveland. Let's head to let's head to Cleveland Mooney lot. I was going to say, what's that? What's the parking lot where it's just an unbelievable tailgate, and it is Mooney lot in Cleveland. Dak Prescott 264. I heard Adam Schefter say this week that he expects Dak Prescott to get north of $60 million to reset the quarterback market. Maybe this time next season. Crazy. CeeDee Lamb also looking for a new contract. 94.5. Amari here 59.5. And Deshaun Watson was limited to 6 games last season at 224.5. It was interesting when Chubb went down, you expect to be more pass happy than Watson went down, and they were. Like with Flacco, this is a team that was passing the football more than anybody. I wonder if they go back to being a run first squad, or they realize like, hey, we got a guy like Njoku and Cooper, we brought in Jerry Jeudy. Maybe we do want to be a pass first team, especially with Chubb most likely not going to be playing week 1. I would say with confidence, probably won't see him until late September or early October at the best case scenario for him. I think this one could be a sloppy game too, dude. I don't know. Is there anything that jumps out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I agree with there is I don't see them being a run-first team until Chubb gets back and shows that he's healthy. I'd also say even if they want to be a run-first team, there's a good chance that Dallas just scores enough that they have to throw this ball. Shout out to Sam once again, pulled the fact in games where Deshaun Watson played and both of these guys finished the game as well. 5 games, Amari Cooper averaged 96 yards per game in those outings. So 59.5 sure seems low to me. I think the passing volume would be there. And yeah, I just think, it's also, we know for years, we've heard the narrative with Amari Cooper. He's better at home and or indoors. He has obviously had a lot of success in this Dallas stadium. So, it's in Cleveland, but home game regardless. So I think very nice spot for Cooper.
Yeah, this number is low given his upside. It's kind of like what we talked about, some high upside wide receivers and Amari Cooper. And I know like down the stretch, Flacco was really peppering him and Njoku, but he seemed to be Deshaun's guy as well at the start of the season. Certainly when you look at the splits tools, Njoku didn't get the same sort of volume with Deshaun Watson as he did with Joe Flacco. And the numbers are fairly similar with Amari Cooper with both quarterbacks there. So 59.5 does seem pretty low there for him. Washington and Tampa here next. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We've got Rashad White, Terry McLaurin. The numbers do seem pretty low on Terry and Mike Evans. These are 2 guys that I have a lot of shares of in best ball. I mean, Mike Evans going as wide receiver 17, 18, 19. I mean, any questions you had about how he would look without Tom Brady? He actually looked better with Baker Mayfield than he did in his final season with Tom Brady. Another season with 1,000 yards, 13 receiving touchdowns. Like, I'm just taking him blindly in a lot of best ball drafts. The discount isn't the same as last year. This time last year was like 7th, 8th round. There were even like, I meant those questions were there, but he seemed to answer them. And then Terry McLaurin, I mean, what do you want to say about this guy? I mean, I think that Jaden Daniels is quarterback, maybe number 12 for him as he heads into year 6 in Washington. And he's had 1,000 yards, I think, 4 times for the 5 years. And he is like definitely the go-to guy. I'm excited for Terry McLaurin because he has to be excited as well because he finally has a quarterback, I think, that can get him the football.
It's funny that these two guys are playing each other in week 1 because I didn't get a ton of things right last offseason, but one of the things that I nailed was the fact that Mike Evans was a much better fit with Baker Mayfield than he was with Tom Brady. Baker, we knew, wanted to throw the ball downfield. Brady wanted to throw those quick ones to Godwin. Evans had a fantastic season as a result. And I think we're getting a similar, not obviously the exact same situation, but a similar situation for Terry McLaurin this year where he now actually has a quarterback who can take advantage of his skill set. So big things coming this year, I think, for Terry McLaurin. Not my favorite play in this game, though. It's higher on Mike Evans, 62.5 receiving yards. Evans was over this in 9 of 17 games last year, and Washington was dead last by a mile in DVOA against wide receiver ones. I think a lot of that will continue this year. So it's just a smash spot to start the year for Evans. I also hope we get scorchers on him. I wouldn't just play the scorchers. I'd also play this base number 62.5, but man, I'd play Evans all the way up to like 100 yards in this one. I'll probably ladder him in just the standard prop market as well.
Yeah, that secondary was trash, man. It was bad. I don't really think they made any adjustments that are going to be all too glaring, or the improvements. I think they'll still be a bottom 5, bottom 10 secondary this season. LA and Detroit should be fun. Right. Yeah. We had that matchup last year in the playoffs in Detroit in the dome. Jared Goff actually 14 games this season in a dome. So a lot of his road games will, I mean, the splits for Jared Goff for the past couple of years have been significant, but the fact that he does get to play a lot of his road games this year in a dome is good for him and Detroit fans. There's a lot of options here, right? I mean, it's just a high total game, right? We got Stafford and Goff, we have Gibbs and Kyron Williams, we have Puka and Kupp, and Puka at 73.5, Kupp at 66, Amner at 84, and Sam Laporte at 54, and then the rushing there for Jahmyr Gibbs at 61.5. This is seems like some sharp numbers here, but this is a game that, I mean, from a DFS standpoint, I know a lot of people will be trying to stack it.
Yeah, by the way, a quick shout out to Underdog. I think this interface is just so much better, so easy to use. So I love the fact that you just go scroll down by games. You got all the Lions on the left side, all the Rams on the right side. It's just, it makes it infinitely easier to find the place that you're looking for. I don't know that I have a play here because, as you said, there are so many options, not just that we can go to, but there are so many options that Goff can go to. There are so many options that Stafford can go to. And there are so many options that these offensive coordinators can go to, whether on the ground, through the air. So I don't feel great about anything, even though I think all of these guys are in play, especially on the higher side.
Yeah, and Kyron, like, there's no point to get involved with him right now. He's dealing with a foot injury. I'm sure he's going to be ready to go week 1, but, you know, Blake Corum's getting a lot of buzz there. And Jahmyr Gibbs at 61.5, it may seem low, but I'm telling you guys, Dave Montgomery is not going anywhere. This guy is still going to get his double-digit carries. He's still going to, you know, probably be top 10. He was top 5 in red zone rushing attempts last year. So I like Gibbs, the player. I definitely think he's better than Montgomery. Don't get me wrong, but when you follow the trends in Detroit, and even with the game on the line last year to beat the Niners, they decided to run up the middle with David Montgomery, and that did not work out for them. But we'll move on. Okay, that is a Sunday night.
Real quick, I want to echo that. Gibbs, his 61.5 number was something that immediately caught my eye. I thought I'd be playing it. When I looked into it, Rams 24th in adjusted line yards allowed last year, 9th in open field yards allowed. So to me, that screams that this is a Montgomery matchup more than a Gibbs matchup. So I'm not on that Gibbs number anymore.
Yeah, 100% agree there. All right, we got another go for Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. So a lot of primetime games for Aaron Rodgers again this season. We only saw 3 snaps from him last year, 3 or 4 snaps. He is in San Fran to take on the 49ers team. He struggled against 231. His number in terms of passing yards, Brock Purdy at 247. We have CMC at 84.5, Breece Hill at 66.5, Debo at 51, George Kittle at 49, and Garrett Wilson at 67. Man, the numbers on Debo and Garrett Wilson seem pretty low. Ayuk's not on this board. I expect him to play, but who knows? He may not play. We could get traded. But Debo at 51.5, and I know the Jets defense is good, but just the way that they use him, Blickle, all the time, all over the field, he is the engine in this offense. And then Garrett Wilson, I think we're really going to see what Garrett Wilson can do this year when he has a capable quarterback under center.
I've been taking Garrett Wilson like 5th or 6th in drafts. If some of those other stud receivers are already gone, I'm taking him ahead of Breece Hall. I'm taking him ahead of Bijan Robinson. So Garrett Wilson higher than 67.5, one of my absolute favorite plays on the board. And if I'm already playing that, then I might as well correlate with this Debo number as well, higher than 51.5. Shout out one last time to Sam Chowdhury on these Debo stats. 65 yards per game when he's playing with Purdy, and he's gone over this number in 63.7% of games in his career when playing at least 70% of snaps, which of course he should do here. So if there's no Ayuk, that just becomes even better. But if Ayuk plays, this is still a very low number on Debo. So one of my favorite pairs in the higher for both Debo and Garrett Wilson. And by the way, this is another one. I would love it if we get scorchers on these guys, because I think both have the potential not just to hit this at a high frequency, but give me Garrett Wilson over 100 yards, give me Debo over 70 yards, etc. I'm all over these two.
This time last year, I was all in on Garrett Wilson too, and I just don't want last year to, mess with my mind. I want to be in again because of the same reasons, like the capable quarterback, the talent that he has, the targets that he's going to get. Mike Williams is not going to play in this game. They got Malachi Corley as a rookie in this game. So Garrett Wilson, I think he's going to be among the leaders in targets. And from like a touchdown perspective, this is a guy that I think could lead the NFL in receiving touchdowns. And I don't want to say that he's going to be Devontae Adams-like, but I think it's going to be very similar. I think it's going to be a lot of pitch and catch with these guys, and I think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers at this point of his career leaning on his best weapon, and that is clearly Garrett Wilson. So I love it. Should we recap here? What do we? That's the schedule. We went through all the games. Why don't we recap without me tossing in a couple that I did for you? Why don't you recap like the 6 or so that you like?
I'm going to include the ones that you said because you.
Okay.
First of all, a lot of really high quality week 1 games. So, like as if we didn't need to be more excited for week 1. This should be an absolute blast. But yeah, we've got Garrett Wilson higher, 67.5 receiving yards. Debo Samuel higher than 51.5 receiving yards. Moving up the board, we've got Mike Evans higher than 62.5 receiving yards. If you want to include Terry McLaurin higher than 58.5, I think you certainly can alongside of Evans. Higher 59.5 receiving yards on Amari Cooper, higher 59.5 rushing yards on Zamir White, your call, which I'm now fully on board with. And then we've got higher 61.5 receiving yards on Metcalf. I'll just scroll up on the right side now. Ridley lower than 55.5. Zach Moss lower than 68.5. Might be my favorite play on the board, even though it's already moved down by 4 yards. It still might be my favorite. Absolutely love that one. CJ Stroud higher than 271.5. James Conner higher 54.5. This is the one where I'm with you on this one, but I would like a touchdown even more. So if we get the same thing with Conner that we have with Derrick Henry, I will switch from his rushing yards to a touchdown. He's been so good as a goal line back alongside of Kyler. And then Dalton Kincaid higher 47.5 receiving yards. Here's the Henry touchdown. You can also go to the Henry rushing yards to correlate with another one of my favorites in week 1, Travis Kelce, lower 72.5 receiving yards. That's a lot of plays. Some of these are going to move, but some of these are going to stay and be available pretty much until week 1.
Yeah, I think rolling through the favorites, certainly the Moss one does stand out to me as just, I mean, we've already seen some live movement, but you mentioned it, that number is still pretty good. The Dalton Kincaid one as well. Like, I just think that this guy's in for a monster season. You could see towards the end of the year as well. I think he had like 15 targets and just over 100 yards in those last 2 games into the playoffs. He was a guy that Josh Allen leaned on a little bit. The Garrett Wilson one does stand out, and Debo and Mike Evans as well, and that piss poor secondary that Washington has. And I'm telling you guys, like, don't worry about the efficiency numbers and people taking shots at Zamir White, the lack of catches out of the backfield. I mean, they got arguably the best run blocker in the draft, and Jackson Powers Johnson. He allowed 1 pressure last year and took home the Remington Award as the best center in college football last year. So a nice addition, and I see that the Raiders are ranked as a top 5 offensive unit, their line anyways, over at FTNFantasy.com. This is fun. It got me excited. I'm even more excited for week 1. Like I said, you get some props, you get some player props. More will surface over at UnderdogFantasy.com, but a couple, friendly reminders. One, promo code FTN over at Underdog Fantasy, 50% deposit match bonus up to $250 when you use promo code FTN. You mentioned the Stats Hub, right? Diving into that, it's just absolutely amazing. Check it out over at FTNFantasy.com. We have a new core package if you're just looking for redraft rankings and cheat sheets and projections, the VIP status. You mentioned DVOA, get all the statistics and all the tools that we have that can help you make some of these decisions when we get into the season. Split tools, pace tools, and just all kinds of amazing data to be had to help you win some cash. That's what we're here for. So Alex Blickle 1, myself, Chris Meaney, head on over to FTN. Let's get in the Discord channels. We'll have some fun. And I know you'll be doing some more shows too as we get closer to the NFL season, maybe some futures and things like that. So any final words, Blickle?
Yeah, I just want people to know that we're going heavy into this pick'em world this NFL season. We've been having a blast with it all NBA season, all PGA season, MLB season, just cleaned up at the Open Championship over on Underdog. So it's going to be a big part of our NFL process. You're going to want to be a part of FTN Fantasy, the DFS subscription in particular.
Absolutely. All right. Let us know in the comments what your favorite prop is, one that you like that we mentioned, one that you're fading. We'd like to hear from you guys as well. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.